Dardanelle was officially incorporated into Arkansas in 1855 and will celebrate its 161st anniversary in 2016. Before this, the earliest modern inhabitants of Dardanelle were the Native Americans. These groups were the Osage, Quapaw, and Cherokee. It was the Cherokee who contributed to one of the most historical events in Dardanelle history. This event is known as the Treaty of Council Oaks. The meeting was held between the then acting governor, Robert Crittenden, along with Watt Weber, Thomas Graves, George Morris, Black Fox, Waterminnow, John Jolly, and Young Glass. Despite its name, the Treaty of Council Oaks was not an actual treaty-making event. Mr. Crittenden did not have the authority in any event to initiate treaties with the Indian tribes on behalf of the U.S. government. Crittenden wanted to minimize lands under Indian control and was looking for leverage to hasten their removal. The Cherokee came because they were unsatisfied with the size and shape of their lands. Neither parties left the meeting satisfied, and both subsequently pressed their cases in writing to the Secretary of War, John C. Calhoun, who had supervisory authority over Indian affairs at the time. The Cherokee in Arkansas were unable to secure changes in their reservation boundaries. It was in 1826 that the U.S. government opened the Lovely Purchase Tract to white settlements, which led to the 1828 treaty. In this treaty, Arkansas Cherokee surrendered their Arkansas land for new land in Oklahoma, so Crittenden and his followers got most out of what they wanted from the meeting in Dardanelle, but years later in the event. Around the time of 1935, downtown Dardanelle was a bustling location. There were no empty buildings. Buildings that became empty did not stay vacant long. Saturday was a day when people came to town. People came to town to do their grocery shopping or just to visit with friends. Before the proliferation of the automobile, some people could only come to town once a week, and when they did come, they stayed all day. Where Moulin's gift shop recently burned down was the location of Senior's Drug Store. The store was owned by Mr. Bob Berry and made drugs the old way by compounding the prescriptions together. Next door to that was a building that never seemed to stay occupied all the time, but at one time was a grocery store. Next to that was J.C. Woodson's clothing store. They sold a wide variety of clothing items for every member of the family. Beside that building was another drugstore that was owned by Mr. Mace Howe. Across the alley was the Dardanelle Mercantile Company. The Dardanelle Mercantile Company was a general all-purpose store. Next to that was another grocery store owned by Mr. Gray. Adjacent to that building was a restaurant known as Major's Cafe. It was a very small restaurant and considered a forerunner to fast food. Next to that was a bank that was later turned into a pool hall. Right next to the current fire station was a building that housed two businesses in it. One part of the building was used as a liquor store, and the other part was a cleaning and pressing shop. The next building going north was the Kaiser Fraser Automobile Agency. The vehicles they sold there were known for being high quality and ahead of their time. Across the alley was a shoe shop where many of the older teenagers liked to hang out. Next to that building was the DNR Railroad Express office. It also served as a bus station for the 4 or 5 buses that would pass through Dardanelle. Next to that was the only 5 and 10-cent store Dardanelle had. Across the alley was a ladies' boutique shop and another restaurant. Next to those buildings was a hardware store owned by Mr. Reese Scott. These 3 buildings, the boutique, restaurant, and hardware store, all burned down. During the fire, shotgun shells and .22 shells went off, sounding like firecrackers. Starting at the beginning of the street, on the other side was the Bank of Dardanelle. The building next to that was a barber shop. Beside the barber shop was a printing office of the Dardanelle Post-Dispatch. The Dardanelle Post-Dispatch is one of the oldest weekly newspapers west of the Mississippi River. To sum up everything, within 3 city blocks there were 6 grocery stores, 4 combination beer joints and cafes, 3 hardware stores, 5 clothing stores, 6 automobile dealerships and or garages, along with 5 drugstores. The First Baptist Church of Dardanelle was organized in 1848, but before that, small groups of Baptists met in homes for their services. The Dardanelle Baptist Association held its first meeting in the Presbyterian Church in Dardanelle in 1854. 5 churches participated in the meeting. James Vesey served as the moderator, with Robert Vesey serving as the clerk. The First Baptist Church building was erected in 1859. This building was never completed because both armies used the structure during the Civil War, and as a result it sustained serious damage. The building was purchased afterwards and was salvaged for lumber for a home. In 1901, a brick church building was erected on the corner of 2nd and Market Street. That building was later torn down and the present church building was built in its place in 1964. The first Methodist service in Dardanelle was preached by Reverend J.P. Cole in the summer of 1851. Before this, however, the Methodists had an organization that met in the Apple Tree Schoolhouse. The present Methodist Church was built in 1917. This building was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1996. The records show that the Presbyterian Church was organized at Norristown on April 9, 1843. At a meeting held on April 9, 1843, it was decided that the Presbyterian Church would erect a new building in Dardanelle. A church building was erected on 2nd Street. This building, along with the church in Norristown, were both destroyed during the Civil War. After that, the members were scattered from 1861 to 1865. In 1872, a new brick church building was erected on Pecan Street and was used until it was sold in 1912. For some years, the people had been wanting a new church. With the $925 which had been received through the Civil War, the ladies of the church started a church fund. They then worked until they had several hundred more. Then it was decided to sell the old building and erect the current building on lots that had been donated towards the center of town.
Of course, we all know about the pontoon bridge. The pontoon bridge was put in 1881 at a cost of $25,000. And at that time, it was the longest pontoon bridge in the world. The bridge was crossed at what is now Harrison Street. Harrison Street went down the slope down to the riverbank, and the bridge was crossed then from Harrison Street. The pontoon bridge was a toll bridge. That is, it cost to cross it. And these are some tremendous toll fares. For a person walking across the bridge, it cost a nickel, 5 cents. If a person was crossing in a buggy, depending on the size of the buggy, it was either 25 cents or 35 cents. It cost an automobile 50 cents to cross the bridge. And a person on a horse, let me back up on the person. I said it cost a person 5 cents, but if he was riding a horse, it cost 15 cents for him to cross the bridge. The pontoon bridge was taken out of service with the steel bridge going in 1929. And if you know a little bit about Dardanelle history, 1929 was the year of a tremendous flood that just about wiped out all of the land that was south of Dardanelle down into what we could now call Carden Bottoms. This steel bridge was unique in that it had a turn span in it, and the turn span was centered over the deepest part of the river channel. There was an arc on each end of that turn span, and it was so imperceptible that you would not know that it had a slight curve on it. And the bridge would be turned 90 degrees, that is parallel with the river, to allow any large river traffic to pass under the bridge. I've seen it turn twice, and I was amazed. It took, you just didn't turn it in 20 or 30 minutes. The steel bridge had a sidewalk on the side of it, and it was kind of a neat place to go on Sunday afternoon if you wanted to take a stroll and walk out across the bridge and watch things floating up and down the river. I can remember in 1945 when there was a flood, and it was nothing for people to walk out onto the bridge to see what was coming down the river, and I can remember hearing trees that had been uprooted by the flood scraping the bottom of the bridge as they went under the bridge. I've seen dead animals floating down the river under the bridge. The new bridge that we have now was the result of river navigation, and it was part of the McClellan-Kerr water system of the entire Arkansas River from the Mississippi River to the river port of Tulsa, Oklahoma. This bridge went into service in 1970 and it is still the bridge that we have going on, we're using today. Now, you asked me to say a few things about the old Joy Theater in downtown Dardanelle. It was the social center of town. There was a show, as we call it, or a movie, every day of the week. The cost for the movie, I'm looking for it here. For children under teenage, it cost 10 cents, adults 15 cents, and popcorn was 5 cents. The theater had on its marquee had the advertisement of refrigerated air. That meant it was cool inside the theater. And the theater had a balcony which was opened during overflow times when there was going to be a first run movie shown there and they anticipated a large crowd. Otherwise the balcony stayed closed. The playbill consisted of, on Saturday there was always a double feature, a cartoon, a serial, a chapter in a serial, and there were 2 movies, 2 showings on Saturday. Well, actually 3 showings on Saturday. There was a matinee and then 2 at night. There was a matinee also on Sunday, and the same movie was showed Sunday and Monday. Then Tuesday and Wednesday was a different movie being shown, and Thursday and Friday was a different movie being shown. So there were, let me see, there was 4 different movies during the week. The Joy Theater burned down in, I believe it was 1949 or 1950. And I can remember seeing that fire. It was quite a spectacle. And it seemed like that when the Joy Theater burned, that it just kind of took some of the life out of the community. However, there was a makeshift theater put in one of the empty building fronts on Front Street, and they put in some athletic style bleachers, and we could see some movies that were shown on 16mm films for the time that the Joy Theater was being reconstructed. The Joy Theater did come back, and it was just as good as it always was. I want to encourage people to find out all about Dardanelle that they can. Dardanelle has an amazing history about it. Dardanelle was a tremendous place to grow up in, and I have always looked back on my days in the Dardanelle schools and living around Dardanelle with lots of fond memories. So thank you very much.